So Boughton had this event. Mark Boughton had this event on Monday night. And everybody's thinking he's going to announce that he's running for governor. And son of a gun, he comes on and he makes a much more interesting announcement. He talks about how, if you look at his name, Boughton, somehow the first 6 letters of that last name were Bought. And I thought, well, that's pretty interesting in light of the situation that that we've seen over the years with Mayor Mark. Oh. Welcome to Progressive Soup. My name is David Stevenson. Tonight I have an exceptional guest, Al Robinson, who's going to talk. We're going to talk about citizen journalism. Al, take us back to when you first began this task of being a citizen journalist. Tell us how it was then and how it's evolved over the years.
Well, I just want to first thank you very much for allowing me to come back on the show. It's been a little while.
Pleasure to have you here.
And I think the last time we had a great time, and we got a lot of viewership on that show. So let's just go back a little bit and talk about how I started this whole thing out. Now, we'll have to go back a few years to the 2004 presidential election. And let's just say I was pretty upset over the way John Kerry was portrayed in the media and the spin that was being done around him, his military record, and things of that nature. So
the surfboarding.
Yeah, just
surfing. Yeah.
The Purple Hearts and all that stuff. So starting in like late 2004, after the election was over, prior to 2004, I did a lot of journalism. I was involved in the college newspaper. I was always involved in journalism going back towards high school. College, I was always involved at editor of my high school paper, editor of my college paper here in Danbury.
So it was a passion of yours long before.
Right. I always loved journalism. It was always a lot of fun doing that. And after that, I did some work for a organization that was affiliated with the New York Jets. So I was always around with journalism, photography, writing, layout design. But at that time, there was no such thing as the internet as we see right now.
Right.
So everything was just print journalism, going into the dark room, printing your pictures out, and doing stuff the old-fashioned way. Wasn't until after the 2004 election where I said, hey, look, I started reading sites like the Daily Coast, America Blog, just the old blogs that we see right now, which some of the big national ones, but they've been around for a very long time. So definitely because of the work I saw at Daily Coast, I said, hey, wait a second, I can do that stuff. I can take photographs. I can videotape. And nothing like that's really happening in Connecticut. Or at least when I looked around, there wasn't that many websites or blogs dedicated to politics in Connecticut. There was semi-political sites like Ed's Daily Rant or Connecticut Blue. But there was this other little site called Connecticut Local Politics that started, I think it was very early 2005. And I probably started just a couple of months after Connecticut Local Politics because I said, hey, look, this guy is writing about stuff that's happening here in Connecticut. I know I can do the same thing. And on top of that, I have all this camera equipment, this video equipment. Why don't I just go out and let me see if I can do this? So that started my first blog called Connecticut Blog. And then from there, I said, well, if I'm doing stuff about Connecticut, why don't I do stuff about Danbury? Because it's very easy to get news in Danbury since I live in Danbury. So I started Hat City Blog, where I started following meetings, videotaping events, and following our great mayor. And because I was following the mayor, or more, should I say, listening to what he was saying and saying, wait a second, that doesn't quite jive with what's actually going on here.
So comparing his words to reality.
Exactly. And I kept a close eye on it, and I started blogging more and more on Hat City Blog. Eventually, as time went on, after the Ned Lamont race was over, and we can go into Ned Lamont a lot, but I'll just jump over that because that's when blogging really exploded.
Yeah.
But after the Lamont race was done, I started to center more of my work on Hat City Blog just to get it up to speed more because it's a lot easier to focus on local politics as opposed to traveling across the state and staying on top of the issues statewide, which is why eventually Connecticut Blog kind of went down into which I'm not really blogging on that much anymore.
Yeah.
I'm doing more work on My Left Nutmeg, which is a different type of blog.
What's happened to print media over these years?
Well, it's a lot easier now. What do you have to? I'll put it to you like this: before the internet, before the rise of computer technologies, or more importantly, like mobile devices like smartphones, you usually get your mail, get your news via the newspapers, and magazines and periodicals of that nature. But now, with the age of computers, people don't want their stuff in a newspaper. People want their news instantaneously. Now we have all these cable channels where you get all this news on a instantaneous basis, as opposed to waiting till noon, 6 o'clock, or 11 o'clock for your news. You can get your news immediately, unfiltered. Oh, well,
but unfortunately, a little bit of triviality mixed in with this instantaneous news. Events become news that really, in retrospect, aren't really news.
Well, you have to be aware of what you're reading and be on top of what you're reading and question everything that you're reading. But in terms of the print media started to decline as the internet became more easier for people to access. Now anybody can put up a website. Now we're in the age of Facebook, where anybody can put up a website automatically via Facebook, and you just do your own blogging via Facebook. And you can have followers, you can have interaction between you and your readership. So it's even gone one step further. That
might be the key: interaction, that interactive element in this media that we have now. Because I remember sitting back and watching the television news. Let's say during the Vietnam era, and you'd have some degree of quality in the journalism, but I found a lot of times that I'd be talking back to the television, which of course is a very frustrating thing, because the television never talks back to you.
Talks back. Well, now you're in an age where, for instance, there was a reporter who did a statement that was wrong, or made a bad statement, and people on Twitter and on Facebook flooded his account saying, "Hey, look, you got this wrong. You got this wrong." And he had to later come out, maybe like 3 or 4 hours later, and say, "Hey, look, you're right. I got this wrong. My mistake." You wouldn't have had something like that years ago.
Possibly. Well, no, they wouldn't apologize.
But you wouldn't have got something. You wouldn't have seen that type of response from a reporter. Let's say 20, 25 years ago.
It would just been gone.
Or you might get a little blurb in it's called the corrections. Newspapers used to have a little section called the correct, saying we messed up on this statement here. But now with the new age of blogging, you get this stuff instantaneously. You can interact with the reporters, ask them questions immediately, and in some instances you get a response. So there's a lot of advantages to the new media that we have right now. I think the biggest thing again is the fact that you can interact with your readership, and I think that's the way to move forward. And now with these new smartphones, like this device I have right here, I can instantaneously talk to somebody and get the news, or respond to somebody's piece of work.
You're right, though. It really does require it puts a lot of responsibility on the viewer, on the listener. It really requires them to question everything they hear, cross-reference, cross-check, because if they don't, then they're no better off than they were back in the days when you read the newspaper and you just accepted what they said as being true.
Right. Well, again, that's one of the great advantages of this new media that we have right now, is that you're able to instantaneously contact the writer, or more importantly, start a conversation amongst different readers based upon the article that you're reading. For instance, there's a few good cases here in Danbury that are going to develop as time goes on. One is the matter with Joe Da Silva being arrested recently. I'm sure that's going to spark a lot of conversation. Because let's just say, hypothetically speaking, of course, you're innocent until proven guilty.
Correct,
But let's just say, hypothetically, that Mr. Da Silva is convicted of this particular crime.
Correct,
Should the city of Danbury, after he's found guilty of a crime, and again, I'm not saying he is guilty, but we're just presuming
it's hypothetical.
Should the city of Danbury invest into the Palace Theater? if it's still owned under Mr. De Silva.
Okay.
I think that's a conversation people are going to have as time goes forward.
Definitely worth having, certainly.
You know, so that's going to be a big matter. There's a few other good cases happening here in the area that's going to spark some interest. Of course, there's a race for mayor that's going to spark interest. Race for governor.
Correct. Yep.
That the mayor of Danbury announced in the town of Bethel. But that's going to spark a lot of interest.
Well, he didn't want to just stay in Danbury. He wanted to go, 15 seconds up the road.
Well, yeah.
So he can say he's been outside of Danbury.
Yeah, outside of Danbury. He's the populist guy with the truck. But
oh, yeah, he's got a truck. I wonder what kind of truck he has. Have you seen it?
Yeah, I've
Is it a real cool truck?
I've only seen it when he had campaign signs in the back of it. Other than that, I've seen the city vehicles that he drove around.
So it might or might not be a very gubernatorial kind of a truck.
Well, it's kind of like the Scott Brown approach, but to each their own. If that's going to be a shtick, that's what it's just going to be a shtick. But in terms of people communicating, at least now we're at an age right now where you can communicate with people across Danbury or throughout Connecticut, or in the case of the De Silva matter, people who are over in Ecuador, because this is an Ecuadorian who was murdered. And people in Ecuador...
Have you heard anything from Ecuador about that?
Yeah, actually, I've been doing some reporting on it. I'll have some more reporting on my website, CTblogger, later on. But it was amazing that when this particular incident took place back in November...
It took place in November?
Yeah, it took place in November. And what happened was there's a lot of media coverage about this in Ecuador. Something that was unbeknownst to me until I went on the internet and I looked it up, and I'm like, wow, there's actually network coverage. So I was able to obtain the interview or the reporting from Ecuador and embed that onto my website, and you can see the relatives of this individual and the funeral that happened and their thoughts on everything that happened. And it sparked there's a lot of interest in this particular matter in Ecuador, to the point in which that you can go on the internet and get the interview, and you can show it here in the States. That's another thing that you didn't have years ago. You're able to access such a broad range of media, and you're able to embed these images or videos right onto your website so other people can see it. Something we didn't have.
Why was a homicide? Because a homicide's a pretty serious crime. Why was a homicide not put into the paper the next day as a big issue?
Well, I don't know. I'm not going to say I know all the particulars in the case. We don't know all the details.
Did they not find the guy dead for, days or weeks later, or was...
No, again, we don't know all the details in the case. Not all the information pertaining to the case is out. The only thing that we have so far is a search warrant that was made public. This case was picked up in the News Times. There was a couple of articles back in November about the case, so it was reported to a certain extent. I don't think that the people knew that there was a police search warrant that was publicly available that showed this information.
Well, sometimes they do work, that they keep a little bit close to the vest,
right? And it's fine because this is an investigation, and we should see this thing all the way through. We should not rush to judgment or anything like that. And whatever happens, happens. But it's just important. I mean, I guess I should say again, it's just great that we live in a new age of journalism where you don't have to just go to the News Times for your source of information. You can come, for instance, you can come to my site and you can actually see the video from Ecuador, the reporting that was done from Ecuador. You can see the reporting done from different media outlets, and I'll have different types of information up there that you might not necessarily see on the News Times.
So now a week later, after you, or a number of days later, after you began putting these things out of Ecuador on your website, I guess I saw something in the paper today, in the News Times today, that sort of picked up on that story. So is this mainstream media picking up on independent media?
Well, I don't know.
Following their lead?
I don't know in terms of the Silva matter if they're picking up on me or because we kind of. I also do blogging for the Danbury News Times as well. So there's
an interaction between you.
I know the reporters who work on the case. There's not that many reporters in Danbury, so
they're down to just a few now. It seems
very few. But for instance, John Pirro, who worked for the News Times, he came out with a good story detailing the details. showing the details within the police search warrant.
Okay.
You know, the difference between what he would do and what I would do, let's say, is that I'll do a post saying, and as a compliment to Mr. Pirro's post on this, here's the actual search warrant document for you to download and you can read for yourself. That's something that you probably wouldn't get before on the Danbury News.
So rather than hearing somebody else's interpretation of what was in the search warrant, you're showing the exact search warrant. So people that are interested enough can take the time and actually read through it and learn a little something generically about what a search warrant entails.
Right. And I think that's one of the important things that I like to emphasize when I do my stuff is that, look, I have an opinion.
Yeah.
And I have my right to my opinion, as everybody does.
Sure.
But what I like to do is not only offer my opinion, and I think this is important because one of the critical reasons why I did this website, Hat City Blog, is because I want to give everybody all the information they have so they can form their own opinion.
Yeah.
Whether it is by providing people with documents towards a certain matter, whether it is a zoning commission meeting, a planning commission meeting, something that's happening in a trial. I want to give you all the documents that these people have that they made to form their own conclusion. I want you to see the information for yourself. Or in the terms of stuff that happens down at City Hall, I want to go down there and videotape the entire event. So when you read a quote in the paper that the mayor or a member of the Common Council or the City Council is making this particular comment about this particular meeting, I want you to see the entire meeting in its full context, so you can form your own opinion.
So you can see that the comment with the inflections and everything else, and within the entire context of the discussion, which is something sometimes quite different. Hearing a snippet out of a comment, or hearing a comment out of a conversation without the rest of the conversation around it. So that's pretty important to be able to think and view in a full context.
Yeah, let's go back to the mayor again. The mayor a few years ago had a series of bundled campaign contributions that were attributed to James Galante.
Correct, yep.
And, the mayor's statement said, hey, I receive hundreds of contributions all the time, and, I can't keep track of everything.
Right.
And I put up, and, we got his statement from different media outlets, and I pointed out on my website, because I went and got all his campaign finance statements, all of them.
Statements,
all of them from like 1999 or 2000 up to now, all of them. That's a lot of them, as you would know.
Sure, yeah.
And I said, look, here's the situation. This guy received 1/3 of his contributions in the form of a PAC within a few days. Let's say you ran for state rep. If you received, let's say 8 $1,000 checks within like a couple of days, I think you would notice that.
That would definitely stand out in my mind's eye, and I would wonder who they're from and what the purpose of those contributions are. What message was being sent to me as a candidate by those individuals?
Well, just because, again, unless you're having some type of fundraiser, that's got to be a massive fundraiser to get $1,000 checks when you're running for mayor.
Yeah.
You usually get contributions trickled in here or there, but unless you do like a fundraiser, you just don't. It's not of the norm, or at least it would sound a little alarm bell if you get a block of contributions in one block, and these people who are giving you these checks are all associated to each other because, again, Danbury is a small town.
Sure, everybody knows who everybody is.
Everybody knows who everybody is, and it isn't that hard. It isn't that hard to put one and one together. At least it wasn't that hard for me because I found another series of these bundled contributions, which appear to me to be bundled contributions, so much so that the Fairfield Weekly came out with an article pointing this out, pointing out what Hat City Blog is. Say, look, as Hat City Blog pointed out, here's these contributions. How can you not see this? Something doesn't jive here. So, yeah, the mainstream media sometimes picks up from what we're doing because sometimes the mainstream media is not around to pick up on the story. You can get a particular angle that the media might overlook. We're in Danbury, for instance. We're not in Hartford. We're not in New Haven. We're not in a major media outlet. You don't see Channel 8 down here. You don't see Channel 30 down here. You don't see Channel 3. You rarely see the New York Times. Basically, all you got is the News Times. So it's important to provide people with as much information as possible. So it makes it easier for reporters to obtain this information as opposed to filling out a Freedom of Information request, going down to City Hall, going through all the documents. You can access my website. You can just see everything right there and form your own opinion. Well,
the impression I've gotten over the last few years, because I've just in the last few years started to follow your work, the impression I'm getting is that there's been many occasions where the News Times, and I don't know if you're reaching out to them directly or whether they're observing you from afar, but I'm seeing a lot of instances where you report something, and within a reasonable time frame after that, now the News Times is reporting on it, almost as if you're driving, your reporting drives their reporting. And I've seen this in other situations with other citizen journalists that they're reporting. I think the classic example is in Virginia in 2006 when you had a guy running for office, Allen, that if he had taken the last 6 months off before the election, he would have been elected. But he instead chose to actually go out and campaign, and he's addressing an audience, and he's looking at a young man who's taping him. And he addresses that young man and calls him a slur, a macaca, which is a rough slur against people of Asian, Indian, Pakistani descent.
Right.
And the young man is there filming him say this to him. And, of course, out on the Internet, it catches people's attention, and bada bing, bada boom, this guy that couldn't possibly lose ends up losing.
Right.
Just because of his own stupidity.
No, well, it is, that's one of the great things, again, about citizen journalism. You can find those moments and put that out there, and that stuff goes viral.
Yeah.
And it gets out there, it spreads like wildfire, and the media picks up on it, and it just goes.
Yeah, they can't help but pick up on it because everybody already knows about it, so they better start reporting about something that everybody seems to be aware of.
Yeah, the citizen journalists can drive the news. I know in terms of the Ned Lamont-Joe Lieberman race, where I was a big part of in terms of following, blogging, and videotaping, one of the big things we did was in the run-up towards the primary, we reached out to all the Democrats and state lawmakers. We said, hey, look, will you support the Democratic nominee after the primary?
Regardless of who
regardless of the individual it was. And you put a lot of people on the spot.
Yeah.
And the media, mainstream media, picked up on it because it's like, wow, that's a really good question. Why didn't we think of that? And we made a list.
Yeah.
We had a list of all the people who were going to stick with the nominee and the people who were going to stick with Joe. And I made it a point to this day, my stick with Joe list is still up there because it's like,
Sticking with Joe,
you stick with Joe people.
And even
Joe
used that as his mantra was, I'm sticking with Joe.
Right.
In other words, blind loyalty rather than either allegiance to the party in general or recognition that in the democracy or republic in America, the winner is the winner.
Right. And again, if you look at the results of the 2006 election, I love to say this all the time because I really want to stick with Joe people. If you look at how Joe Lieberman won, it wasn't because of Republican votes. It was because of people who stuck with Joe Lieberman and after the primary and just stuck with Joe and said, I don't care what he said about the Iraq, I'm sticking with Joe anyway. So everything you've received after that, like when he went towards the Republican National Convention and made his remarks, like, hey, stick with Joe people, thanks a lot for that. Healthcare, stick with Joe people, thanks a lot for that.
You know, a lot of them, I know a lot of them, and a lot of them have been very reasonable about apologizing and very sheepish about what they did.
Well, again, it's too late now.
Yeah.
We knew about Joe Lieberman prior to 2006. He's shown these signs.
Yeah.
We were saying this, and now to stick with Joe people, like for instance Jim Amon, look where his campaign is at right now. He might as well just bow out of the race.
I had him on my show when he talked about that. I don't know if it had enough of an impact on the audience what he said, but he did make some concession about. Joe to him is like a family member, and you always love your family no matter what they do. But he also did make a concession that when he looks at Joe, when he lets his brain go to work and look at what Joe's done, then he's very disappointed. At the very least, very disappointed.
Well, a lot of people should be very disappointed because if it wasn't for the Stick with Joe individuals, we would have a real 60th vote in Senate right now. We wouldn't be talking about all the problems we have right now in terms of trying to get meaningful health care through without all the scare tactics.
Well, there probably are not a super long list, but there are definitely a fairly long list of Democrats that are what I would describe as being corporatist Democrats, and I'll put them in exactly the same boat as corporate Republicans, which in fact is just about all Republicans are corporatists. But some of the Democrats are too, and they form these unholy coalitions on economic issues where they'll divide on social issues, choice, and other constitutional matters, and race and things along those lines. But they form a very sticky and a very tight coalition when it comes to protecting large corporations.
And again, in terms of citizen journalism, again, that's where we come into play very effectively, because unlike the regular media, mainstream media, which, to be fair to the mainstream media, they have a certain amount of column inches they have to report on certain things, so they can't be as wide and as expansive as we are. We can focus on those particular issues and bring those out to light in terms of blogging, whether it's a community blog such as My Left Nutmeg, or a more one-person blog, or as Hat City Blog, or some of the other blogs out there like Spades Boy, Connecticut Bob, where you have one or two individuals driving the news there. But that's some of our Facebook, which is another great thing. And I can't stress enough how unbelievable Facebook is in terms of blogging right now.
But you can great communication tool.
It's perfect. It's perfect
amongst friends, associates, colleagues. You get an opportunity to know in real time what people that you obviously don't have time to spend 3 hours on the phone with people in a given day and ask them and have good conversation with them, but you can catch bits and pieces of what they say and in much shorter period of time and learn a tremendous amount in that short period of time about what your friends are thinking.
Right, and again, in terms of sites in terms of websites or blogs like that, pertaining back to your original point, you can focus on particular aspects of candidates and bring those out to light to inform the public in a way that the mainstream media doesn't necessarily have the time to do it. And that's one of the that's one of the great things about citizen journalism. It's so vast and wide, and it's like a canvas where you can just do any type of form of art on there. And that's a great thing.
To criticize mainstream media so much as to just point out the fact that citizen journalism offers tools to us as individuals that mainstream media just doesn't have. They just don't have those tools to work with.
Yeah, I would say that we're a complement to the mainstream media, as opposed to being very critical towards the mainstream. We should say we're complementing. You can get your news from there, but if you want more detailed stuff,
you can come over where we're at. The other. That's
exactly.
That's a good point. We're going to have to wrap it up with that, but I've had Al Robinson on the show. I'm David Stevenson. This is Progressive Soup, and we're having so much fun, I think we're going to stick around and do another show.
Okay. Why not?
Thank you, Al.
Great
to have you.
Okay.
So.